The Choose Love movement offers no-cost solutions that keep our kids safe, providing them with the skills and tools they need to flourish. Join us in our mission to create the world we want to live in, one that's connected and compassionate. Check us out at chooselovemovement.org. Together, we can choose love.
Hey everyone, it's Scarlett Lewis, founder of the Choose Love movement. Welcome to the Choose Love podcast. I have a very special guest today. His name is Tom Smalley. He is a mental health advocate, performance coach, and weightlifter, also founder of StruggleIntoStrength.com. And their mission statement is striving to break the negative stigma around mental health by showing that internal struggle does not make you weak and that our struggle can actually be turned into our greatest strength. Tom, it is so nice to have you on the podcast today. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I think this one definitely hits even closer to my heart, being from Fairfield County. And first off, I'm so sorry for your loss and what you've done in honor of your son. And I commend you for turning that struggle into strength. And I know he is so proud of you.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Yes. I mean, this sounds very familiar to me because this has been life for the past 10 years,
right.
But not only for myself and my own practice, but I've woven this into everything that Choose Love does and is. It is giving kids and big kids this awareness that struggle actually has a purpose in our lives. It's there for a reason, and it is to help us grow. And when we have that different perspective, it makes that struggle less scary. I feel like we have less fear, and fear can actually even be the thing that heightens pain. And so
Right.
we're able to take away a little bit of that fear and have a different perspective on that struggle. Like, that's going to help me grow. It actually helps. And that's what you've done too. But, you have an incredible story and reason for doing this. And usually people that are doing something incredible like you do have also an equally amazing story. And so, what is your journey that made you come to this realization and then want to spread this message?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think, I think back to just being how lonely I was, and thinking that I was never going to get out of the situation, of that rock bottom that I was in. And knowing that there's so many people out there, so many kids, so many adults, so many teenagers, that are in that same scenario and same situation that I was in, 10 years ago. And a lot of them don't make it. And to me, that's, we can do something about that. And I always say, like, when I started advocating at 16 years old, I didn't do it to reach 900,000 people every time. I did it to reach at least one person every single time. Mm-hmm. It's great to have a bigger reach now, but as long as every single time I speak, one person it hears it, that's one more person that the stigma around mental health is decreasing around, and they're educated, and then or maybe it resonates with them, and my message resonates with them, my experiences resonate with them. Because at the end of the day, I think I say this all the time, it took me a while to figure it out, but I think I know my core purpose on this earth is to serve others, in every capacity I can, right? And it's tiring, right? Because I'm still trying to recovery with mental health is ongoing. And so, but it's so rewarding. Right. And so, I think if I can serve others in the mental health community, in adversity, through my faith, and then, as a performance coach, right, the athletes I work with, the more I can serve others, and love others, the more I'm gonna see them succeed, and it's gonna be really rewarding.
Don't you think that for personal healing and recovery, service is the only way? I mean, there are
100%.
many ways, but I don't think that you can get to true healing and recovery without incorporating
No
service,
doubt. No doubt.
passion in action for others. I mean, I feel that too. That's what my work does for me in the Choose Love movement. It is full on service, love and service. And the amazing thing is, it's all the nurturing, healing love that you give out, you get back. And that's the secret to doing this. It is incredible. And I wish that everybody knew that's the message that both you and I are putting out. And such an incredible thing that you're doing. But you're talking about this dark time in your life 10 years ago. Can you bring us back to that place and show us what that looked like?
Yeah, definitely. So when I was, as a kid, probably like 10 to 12 years old, I was diagnosed with depression, anxiety. Definitely was going through it, but we didn't know what OCD was at that time. And I've been fighting the stigma around OCD for 10 years now since I was diagnosed. And I'd be lying if I said I didn't, stigmatize it myself 10 years ago. When I was a kid, I thought it was always, being organized and, washing your hands. And it's so much more than that. And the media portrays it as being, really organized or, being really clean. And it goes so much deeper than that. It's a clinical mental health diagnosis that is annually ranked, one of the top debilitating mental disorders. So when I was 14 is probably when I really started realizing it. 14, 15, 8th grade, 9th grade. When I got to high school, it really started, the symptoms of obsessive compulsive disorder really started to flare up. And
what did that look like?
Yeah, so I was having these intrusive thoughts. So with OCD, there's these obsessions, and then, which is the O, and then the C is the compulsions. And so with people that have OCD, we have these obsessions, which could be violent intrusive thoughts, sexual intrusive thoughts. It could be taboo, homosexual or sexual orientation. It could be so much just right OCD. So doing things just until it feels just right. Magical thinking, scrupulosity. So like faith in OCD, like moral OCD. So there's different subtypes of obsessive compulsive disorder. And so for me, a lot of my thoughts were focused on my family dying or me slipping and hurting somebody, and just losing control and hurting somebody, which understand when people don't know what OCD is, telling somebody that you're having a violent intrusive thought that you're afraid you're going to hurt somebody, they're going to put you away. You know what I mean? So their first thoughts are, oh, this guy is harmful, and we need to make sure we are monitoring him and he's going to hurt somebody. But in reality, I'm actually just having an intrusive thought from my OCD. I would never act on it. It's terrifying to me. I don't want the thought. They're unwanted obsessions. And so
it wasn't a planning thought. It was a fearful thought that might
It's an irrational, fearful thought that my brain, because of a chemical imbalance, can't rationalize that won't happen. And so, but when you're explaining that thought to somebody, so I never came out about my thoughts until I was probably 15 or 16, because I was so ashamed. And so I always thought I was so alone in that. And I always felt like if I said that, somebody would be like, oh, he's dangerous. And I'm not dangerous. I was having these unwanted thoughts on a mental health disorder. And so when I was 16, I got to the point where I was doing 12 to 14 hours of compulsions a day. So compulsions are what counteracts what OCD wants you to do to counteract the anxiety. So for example, I'd walk in and out of doorways 25 times before I leave. I would close cabinets 50 times before I would shut them, and tie my shoes 25 times each. I was doing things in multiples of 25s and 5s and 50s and 100s. And so it would take I would write something and then I would erase it, write something, then I would erase it. I would type, erase it. counting steps, you name it. I was doing repetitive behaviors like that to combat that anxiety. And so what happens when you do that is OCD wants those behaviors to occur, because then it's feeding that anxious cycle. So it dips down the anxiety immediately, but then that anxiety, that thought comes back immediately, and then it asks you to do it again. So you get caught in this, what they call the OCD loop. And 12 to 14 hours a day of compulsions. I mean, that leaves 10 hours for school, social life, homework, all my athletic endeavors, my faith, like youth group, all that stuff. I'm in high school. I got sleep. So that's 10 hours for all those things, because 14 hours of my day are spent doing compulsions. If you allot all the time I spent doing compulsions. And so at that point, if you
sleep for 8 hours, that leaves 2 hours.
Right, exactly.
8 hours of sleep, right?
Yeah, no, I was probably getting 4 at best. And so I think, I couldn't even get dressed in the morning without taking an hour, 2 hours of doing repetitive behavior. So I was late to school. I was missing school chunks of the time. And at this point, I told my mom I didn't want to live anymore. I just said straight up, like, there's no point. I don't enjoy being alive. I don't see myself, I don't see any of this ending. I don't see any hope in sight, and there's no point to me. And obviously, I mean, look, hindsight's 2020. And I'm glad I said that, because, I did have, thoughts to plan, and not be here anymore. And I think because I said that, my mom probably, put on her mom, wore her heart on her sleeve and begged my therapist for help. And she had her 911 on for sure, her high alert on. And so, but I realize now, how painful that must've been for her to hear me say that. And I think at the time, and even the past 5 years, I think I've realized more and more as a parent, hearing your son say that, is devastating. And you want to do anything you can to fix it. So my mom begged a therapist that I've actually been with for the past 10 years now. But OCD treatment is very, very specific to OCD. It's exposure response therapy. It's a type of cognitive behavioral therapy. And the combination of ERP and medication is what really saved my life. ERP is what you do, and is you go into therapy and you address the thought that you're fearful of. So for me, it was my family dying in a car accident, or me hurting my family members. And then you sit with that discomfort of that thought, and don't deny the thought. And you sit with that uncomfortability and that debilitating anxiety, and you learn how to cope with that anxiety over time. And it decreases over time. Instead of playing into the compulsions and being on this continual loop, you break that loop. So it's literally facing your fear head on. Like whatever your fear is, it's facing it directly head on. So I'd leave treatment, and I was going a few days a week at this point. I would have homework to do. So I'd be like, it was exhausting, right? I would have to go from school to treatment, and it was like, and sometimes I would just not go to school because I was so exhausted from that anxiety. It made me so tired. When I would explain that to teachers or, friends, it was like, oh, therapy, that just means going, Goodwill Hunting, laying on a couch, telling your feelings. And for me, like, that's not what therapy was. It was real work. It was real work, and it still is. And so, I think that's kind of what people don't understand about OCD treatment. And so,
and I think actually, I'll just add, that is definitely OCD treatment. But I think if you are getting therapy and you are really having the courage to face your issues, whatever they are, it is work, because you're taking personal responsibility in your therapist's office for what is going on in your life, and you need to work to change it. You're not blaming somebody else. You're not fault finding other people. You're taking responsibility and you're working at it. And I think that that's a common misconception about all therapy, is that it is just, it's just talk therapy. It's just, whining about your problems and having somebody listen. No, it's actually really hard work facing your issues and then doing the work that it takes to move through them. And as you say, and Choose Love says, actually grow through that experience.
Yeah.
That's pretty amazing. So, and I get there's the struggle.
Right. Yeah. 100%. And so I think, it was tough. I pretty much quit every sport I played, because I couldn't get on the court for basketball. I couldn't get on the field for football. I couldn't play lacrosse anymore. And socially, I didn't have any friends really. It was really tough. I had a couple friends that stood by me through it, but like for a lot of people, the stigma of, they saw me leaving class, coming in late, or counting steps in the hallways. I probably looked bizarre to some kids, right? And how do I explain that? Hi, I'm counting to 15 on my step. I'm only stepping on certain tiles on the floor because I'm afraid I'm going to hurt my family. I mean, how do you say that to someone? Like, how do you rationalize that to people that don't understand OCD? And so for me, that's when I started feeling so alone. And I think what, like we talked about earlier on, is that the advocacy piece is really what helped me not feel alone, and serving others, because once I started advocating, I found the OCD community and working with the International OCD Foundation as a lead advocate. Like I would go to these conferences and I would say a thought like that sounded so outrageous, and someone across the room would be like, I had the same exact thought. And all of a sudden you're like, wow, like I'm around people that deal with this, and it's not just me. And it's really, really comforting. And I think, for me, like I'm a big teddy bear. And I think those thoughts were so terrifying to me because like the people I love, I'm super, super loyal, probably to a fault sometimes. And, I take care of my people. And so to have a thought like that I can't push away from my mind, even today, like I still have these thoughts, I'm going to have them for the rest of my life. Right. And, that was terrifying to me. That was really terrifying to me to have those kind of thoughts, because it made me feel like, I was a bad person or I wasn't worthy of good things. And those thoughts really can creep in and then take over.
Is there a reason why that started? Is that based in childhood trauma, or is there a reason?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a lot of different factors. I don't think there's one root cause. It has shown that the OCD tends to develop or come out more when you hit puberty and when you become a teenager. That's when usually people find those cases, and when people are diagnosed. But I think it was just a combination of going into a new school. I transferred to a new high school. Going into high school, I was out of my district, and then just the stress of high school and growing up, and I already had that anxiety diagnosis. Hindsight, I realized, that anxiety and depression, that was all caused from the OCD. I was having those depressive bouts and that anxiety from OCD. So as a kid, we look back and we're like, man, like you definitely had OCD back then too. Like it's just, it just was easier to find when you were a teenager.
And what did it look like when you were 10? If you look back, and you said you were diagnosed in your teens, but if you look back when you were first diagnosed, what would that OCD tendency look like?
I think
back then,
the biggest thing for me would be like getting really, really fixated on certain things. If I lost a game, it was like I would be doing stuff to not over the top to not lose, or just like little tendencies like that, where I realized that like those were compulsions.
Mm-hmm. Kind of rituals.
Yeah.
And the thoughts started then too, but
definitely. I just think they weren't as extreme or violent.
Right.
I think that's when my head went off and I said, okay, like this isn't normal. Who am I? Why am I having these thoughts? That's when I started having those thoughts. I think that's when it, some of my thoughts, other than, hurting my family or friends, or, or my family friends dying in a car accident, where I had the thought that God hates me, or that there's a few of them I still deal with today. And one of them like that I still deal with a lot, that's been prevalent throughout my time in treatment lately, is like, every time something good happens, it means something bad's gonna happen, so like you have this like karma, like, because I just, my whole life I just felt like I haven't deserved that. And so, and then a lot of it was like just right OCDs, which is like you do things until it feels just right, and then you can let go. So I have to have a good thought until I have a good thought while I'm doing something. I can't stop. So if I was drinking from a water bottle, I would keep drinking until like until I could say a good thought and it felt right.
So it's
so
interesting because
just things like that.
I think that we all have that thought when things are going really well. We kind of pause and we look around like, oh my gosh, I'm so happy right now. My life is going so well. I hope nothing happens. I think that that's normal. And OCD is just kind of a little bit over the top thinking, bringing that kind of thinking to.
Yeah, definitely. No, I mean, I totally agree. I think I think you hit the nail on the head there. I think that's where people get confused, is like, oh, like I have tendencies. So the biggest thing I like to say is like, pretty much everybody has obsessive tendencies or some sort of obsessive tendency or are anal retentive, but that doesn't mean you have OCD. And the most hurtful thing people can say is like, oh, I have OCD too, when I try to explain OCD, if they don't actually have OCD. Because it's like, if someone came up to me and said like, I have cancer, I wouldn't be like, oh, I have cancer too. Right.
Right.
It's the same thing. Right. And so, like you can have habits, and you can have rituals and certain superstitions and certain likes or needs, but if those likes or needs or rituals aren't allowed to occur, is your whole day literally ruined? Right. Are you sitting with, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 out of 10 anxiety all day? Right. Definitely afraid that your parents are going to die in a car accident because you didn't pick up your pencil and point it to the left. No. So that's where OCD comes into play. And
yeah,
you can have obsessive tendencies, but that doesn't mean you have, it's OCD when you get clinically diagnosed with it as a disorder.
Yeah, when it disrupts your life. And
right.
And
when it disrupts daily life, that's when it's OCD.
Yeah. And people kind of maybe try to internalize and identify with you. I mean, I think I was trying to do that too. I'm like, well, I have some pretty bad thoughts myself. Not that I was thinking that it was OCD, but I'm just, trying to make the connection. I think maybe that's what, and then people just don't realize
right.
at all the suffering that's involved in this.
Yeah. I mean, it's daily suffering. It really is. But I mean, I think there's with proper treatment and medication, I think you can get past that suffering, like we said, overcome that adversity and turn it into your strength. But I think it is, I used to get really, really frustrated and really, really angry, honestly, about, I could be in a Starbucks line and hear someone say, oh, I'm so OCD. And I just felt the need to like say stuff all the time about like, oh, do you really have OCD? But the reality is like, what I'm realizing now as an advocate is a lot of it's just innocent ignorance, right? Mm-hmm. Like people don't know, people haven't been educated. And so I think when my awareness and my advocacy comes out of love and not frustration is when you open more minds and more hearts. And
absolutely.
I think that's kind of, as I've gotten older, what I've realized, right? I'm not an activist, I'm an advocate. And, we don't need to do it in a way that is entitled or angry, because that's just, all that's doing is just labeling us as what they want to label us, right? And so I think it's super, super important to do it out of a place of love and education instead of frustration. And just
Absolutely.
realizing that like you're not going to get to everybody all the time. Like, and I think that was my biggest concern, that I need to reach everybody all the time. Like, listen, it's a lifelong mission.
And I'll tell you what, you get more people with love than you do if you're having a message that's going to turn off, and it's angry, resentful, hateful. That's going to turn off a portion of your audience. And so love is definitely something that connects us all. And I love that advocacy versus activism.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm the same way. I mean, obviously, have got a choose love movement, and
right.
want everybody to have this message. So you said that you still struggle, and obviously we would want you to be able to say that you had this cognitive behavioral therapy and exposure therapy, and you're on medication, and that it's controlled, I guess, but there's still some symptoms.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, so OCD is chronic, and maybe it won't be that way forever. But right now it is. And so, I don't say that to not give people hope, but my story is a living testament that there is hope, right? I'm functioning, and not only functioning, I'm living a life that I feel like is fulfilled and rewarding. So I think that's where I want people to understand is like, yeah, like there's ups and downs. Like, I don't know, last Wednesday I had a bad OCD. I had a bad day with my OCD. It was tough. Just from morning to start. And sometimes you just can't get in that rhythm, and it's just a tough day. And so, but that doesn't mean that Thursday wasn't good. And that doesn't mean that Friday wasn't good and the weekend wasn't good. It just means that right now, even 10 years into recovery, I think it's just that's how it is. But we don't want, I think, especially at the IOCDF, like our message is like, we don't want people to just survive with OCD. We want people to thrive, right? Like, we don't need to just survive, right? We don't want you just getting by and living. We want you to live and thrive with OCD, because you can. And I think part of that is them realizing, how effective treatment is. It's the gold standard, right? And so I think that's kind of one of my missions, is just to get people diagnosed faster and get people into treatment sooner, because I think there's just such a need. I mean, I talked to 3 parents in the past week that said, I can't find somebody that does ERP. And it's super frustrating. Luckily I was in a suburban area in Fairfield, but like, if needed be, like, I could have traveled to New York City for treatment, right? I could have traveled to, but people that are in Indiana or, rural areas, right? Like, how many ERP specialists are there that treat OCD? And that's what we're realizing now is like, we need more people trained in ERP. And so that's been kind of a big mission for us.
So you co-founded an organization that helps people with OCD. Can you talk to us about that, and where people that are listening that want to learn more and want to help can find that?
Yeah, definitely. So are you referring to anxiety in athletes or struggle and strength?
Well, I'm referring to for athletes for right now, but then I want to get into struggle to strength.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So fast forward, obviously, to the background. This was to college. I had stopped playing sports. Obviously, was really big into training. I always loved the weight room more than the actual sports I was playing, to be honest, because there's something so asynchronous between the weight room and the process of improvement in there, and the process, what it was like improving in treatment and my own self-development and growth. And I made that connection pretty early on. And so I think that's why I fell in love with training in the weight room. But I loved the sport of basketball. And so I got to Siena College when I was this is pretty much after my teachers told me that I probably wouldn't last in undergrad, that would be too much for me. But stubborn me was like, no, I'm going to 4-year school, whatever. and, obviously fast forward now, and it's like, I got my master's and stuff. So, it's just, a testament to making sure you have the right support system around you. And, my biggest thing is, like, nobody can place limits on you, right? Nobody can place limits on what you can do. If you can dream it, you can do it. And so I got to college, and I wanted to stick around, be around the sport of basketball. I wanted to be involved in athletics. And so I became a student manager for the men's basketball team at my 4-year school. And around that area, the school was a big deal with basketball. It was a big sports team there. And at the time, I was a very public advocate for OCD and about my mental health. So I was going to college, full force, advocate, mental health advocate, and trying to do more and more each week with it. And so, whether people like that, how they responded to it, I just didn't really care, because I knew my cause and my purpose. And, I wasn't gonna get rid of that purpose. And so,
what was the response? I mean, was it mostly good, I hope?
Yeah. So I think, for the most part, I think my peers were pretty solid, very solid peers. But unfortunately, I ran into a situation in college where, the coach I was working for as a student manager used my diagnosis and my suffering to belittle me and to bully me every day.
Wow.
He'd call me things like, and I'm sorry to say that, he would call me things like the next school shooter, the next Unabomber. He would call me things like, did you take your crazy pills today?
Oh my God.
He would tell me
He's still working? Is he still working?
No, he's fucking gone.
Wow.
He would say things like, girls won't want to date. You should probably not disclose your mental illness about females because they're not going to want to go on dates with you, and you should be less public with it. So just really shaming me. And obviously I have a heavy heart, talking about that with you because I know, everything you've been through and stuff. But
we have to talk about it though. We have to talk about it that people are saying those things.
Right. And it's just, things that it just takes situations, right, that were so real and affected so many people. And, is so insensitive towards those situations, right? And it's outrageous that someone would actually say that. And then also it creates this label of me that is just so awful. Like I would never hurt anybody. Right. And so, those are things that it's crazy because the first year I kind of just brushed it off because I was like, oh, this is Division I basketball. This is the big leagues, whatever. I have to have a tough skin. Right. And then I'll never forget. I was at the International OCD conference where I had talked at multiple conferences at that point every year. I'll be in San Francisco this July talking. And so I was after we talk, as we see each other, all my, OCD community friends, we see each other once a year because we're all in different places around the country. Some of us are in the UK, some of us are out West. So, it's amazing. You come together for one weekend in July and it's just incredible. And so we usually end up after our panels of speaking, we usually end up, sitting in a lobby or, at the whatever diner nearby and end up talking till 3 a.m. Just connecting. And it's that's probably I go on a tangent because that's my favorite part of the conference is just those connections because it's love, right? It's just literally love. And so I was just talking about my experiences and I mentioned what that coach was saying and their jaw dropped. And that's when I realized what he was saying, that was out of pocket. That was just way out of line. And I had been desensitized to it. And because I had heard it so much. And that's when I realized I needed to say something. Mm-hmm. And so I was close with, some people in the school that I had developed relations with, and I confided in them. And then what ended up happening was, and I didn't ask for this either. It's not how I wanted to go, but he was also, using homosexual slurs at certain players and, pushed a kid out of his seat in a film session. So it wasn't just me. And so in my eyes, I'm around people that are on scholarships to play there. And so these are a lot of kids that come from, backgrounds where they need those scholarships. So they're not in any sort of position to say something, right? Because at the end of the day, like if I lost my job as student manager, it was volunteer anyways. So, I'd be devastated, but like, whatever, like at least I stood up for what I believe in. And at least all the other people are going to be, treated better. Right. And so I really spoke up because I felt bad for the people around me. It wasn't about me. And so, but obviously when someone says those things to you, that's going to be the headline of the story. Right. And so, I'm in my 6 to 9 p.m. class, and sophomore year, and my phone's buzzing. And I'm like, all right, this is weird. One, because my phone I'm not popular. So I was like, this is strange. And so I step out of class and I see, my parents, texting me, and my brother, and they're like, what the heck is happening? And so there was a story broke in the Albany Times Union and in CBS News, Sports Illustrated, ESPN. So all these major news outlets. And the title was, head coach under investigation by NCAA and school for alleged abuse towards team manager with OCD. My name wasn't in the story, but how easy is it to identify me when I was literally just in a documentary about living with OCD as a college student? So all of a sudden I'm in this spotlight, right? And it's like, shit, man, I didn't ask for that. Like, I just wanted to do right by the people around me and help other people and just take a stand about what's happening. And so it turned into a huge story. So, I leave school for a couple of weeks, and that coach refuses the allegations in a press conference of his own. And so now I look like, but then all the people around me are confirming the stories and more that he, withheld meal money from players. So it went so much deeper. Right. And so it went so beyond me. And I think that's such a trend in my advocacy, is like, this is so much bigger than me. Right. Like, it's not about me. It's about the community. Right. And about the people that are still living so lonely, and that feel like there is no hope. And so, what I realized was like, man, like this is the opportunity right here. I could pick one path, and I give a lot of credit to the IOCDF and to my support system that I had, that they helped me choose the correct path, because obviously at this point I was angry, right? He Absolutely. Called me. There was a lot of bent up frustration of me. I'm deemed as a whistleblower. People around campus are like, "Oh, that's the kid that was abused," right? And so that's super frustrating. It wasn't a big school. It was 3,500 kids. Everybody knew me, right? As soon as that story broke, everybody knew who I was. And I can't go out to bars in the city. I can't go out to parties, right? So now my social life is not that it was abundant to begin with, but now I can't be a college kid.
Which is so counterintuitive when you're saying this, because I would think that all the players on your team would be lauding you, and that it seems like we should appreciate people that have the courage to speak out and to stop bad things from happening. So the fact that that's not what happened is just mind-blowing to me.
For sure. And it's without question that there were definitely a handful of players that I'm still super close with today, that appreciate, and without having to say it, I know, they think they know what I did, they know, and there's just this unspoken love and appreciation for each other. And I think that was the other thing. Like, I didn't need it. I didn't need the praise. I just wanted the change, right? I just wanted to see the change. Like, that's all I care about. And so he forcefully resigns, which is it's a win for the people, and the school, because, I think the program is a great program and it's on a great track again. And they've had a lot of success since that occurred. And they hired a really, really great coach who I worked with afterwards that I still talk to. He was on my podcast, Jamie and Christian. Tremendous leader, tremendous person that I learned a lot from. And so, you know, it's not without say that this situation didn't have blessings in between, right? So within
that's
that,
a strong message out to the entire athletics community that's not going to be tolerated.
Right. And so I think there's so many things to dissect, and I could talk about it forever, but and so many lessons like that 5 years ago I didn't really think about because you're in the storm, right? When you're in a storm, you don't think about these things, but now I'm like, man, like one, it taught me how not to be. And sometimes that's even more valuable than how being taught how to act. Two, it taught me that like that whole staff, because the staff were his minions, so it was kind of the whole staff in him. They didn't expect a 20-year-old to stand up to them. Mm-hmm. They didn't expect that. They thought I was going to stay silent and shut up, just like probably every other kid they've talked to like that, every other kid. And so whether they think I'm entitled, whether they think I have this ego, whatever it is, they did not think that I was going to stand up to them. Mm-hmm. And then also it just, like you said, like it hopefully inspired other people to realize that they, like athletes now, especially, and I preach this to all my athletes, you have options. You have a transfer portal where you can go to a different school if you want to. You have administration that should be supporting your endeavors and your holistic health and wellness. And if these schools, and I've done a lot of rants on this, they always say they don't have the money to get a sports psychologist, for the athletic department. No, you have enough money. You're just not allocating the resources and funds for that. Instead, you're paying a head coach $900,000 because
it's not
don't say you're about the student athlete health and wellness if you're not going to actually be about it, because you're going to post that mental health graphic in May. I know that you're going to post it on your social media, right? But then what are you doing the other 11 months, the other 48 weeks, right? So
they have to be held accountable.
That's kind of been my mission as I've transitioned. But the other blessing was that throughout that time of the abuse and the belittling, I formed really good relationships. And one of those relationships was with Ian Farrell, who was the head strength and conditioning coach at the college I was at. And so, when I would go on road trips, he would take me under his wing, protect me from the bullying. He would take me to train with him and meet other strength coaches at other schools. And so that developed my love for the performance field, because everything I knew about mental health and what I went through and everything I loved about physiology and learning about the human body, I realized that's when I realized I wanted to be a strength and conditioning coach. And so without that situation that I went through, I wouldn't be in the career path that I'm in. And so that's the biggest blessing to me, is that like, yeah, I went through something traumatic, but like it helped me find my purpose along the way.
Mm-hmm. It's so beautiful that you're actually listing on your hand all of what you call the blessings or the gratitudes, that came out of that struggle. And it's just so incredible, all that you've accomplished through that, and because of the struggle, not despite it.
Right. And like I said, the IOCDF and my support system definitely helped me. There was two paths to take in that situation, right? I'm in a national spotlight now. So it's either be that angry, and mentally ill quotations person that he labeled me as, and go back at him and be mean and do interviews and do that, or use that space, that spotlight, as educational awareness for what OCD really is and how the stigma around mental health is so traumatic for people that deal with mental health disorders, and that we need to break that stigma.
Yeah, amazing. So we would call that you chose love over fear, which is anger, hatred, revenge. You chose the high road.
And
empowered yourself in the process. And so you started struggle to strength. And can you tell me how you weave everything that you've learned through this struggle into what you do now?
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, choosing love is definitely the right word for it too, because, to this day, I've never gotten an apology from him, and I didn't expect it. Right. But I chose love in the fact that, like, did it take me a while to forgive? For sure. But I forgive him. I've said it on my podcast. I've said it on other interviews. Like, I forgive you. Like, here it is. I forgive you. If I see you, I'll say hi, whatever it is. All right.
Because that's the stronger thing to do. And I'm sure that he still feels like he's the victim in the whole thing.
100%. And that's the other thing. I genuinely don't think he believes he did anything wrong still, which, is just, we're all raised different ways and we're all, come from different backgrounds. But so struggle and strength was so in treatment, my mom actually created this mantra, struggle and strength, for me. I'd like to take a little credit, but she probably deserves more credit than I do.
Well, she may have thought of the mantra, but you were
I was living it for sure. Yeah, for sure. And that's not to say she didn't do the work too, though. She sacrificed a tremendous amount for me. My dad sacrificed a tremendous amount for me to afford treatment. My brother sacrificed a lot of attention and a lot on his achievements in high school and college, and to see me get better and never batted an eye. He's my best friend, and he never ever cared that I had to get more attention and that my parents had to care for me, and he had to be more independent and stuff. And I wish I try to highlight him as much as I can now, because he deserves so much of that credit. But essentially, what we turned into struggle and strength was, we wanted to be just like Choose Love, like just a movement of taking your adversity and turning it into, and that pain that you feel and that struggle that you're going through, and turning it into something positive to uplift people around you and uplift yourself. And that's really what it's all about. It does. Obviously, my story is based on mental health, but it could be about physical health. It could be about trauma-related issues. It could be about family, marital issues, whatever it is, that struggle that you're going through. We just want you to be able to feel empowered to turn it into your strength. And then also, it's a vulnerability thing. Something I saw a lot as a collegiate strength coach was that we were teaching these, not me personally, but a lot of these people around me and these athletic departments were teaching these kids to, in sports, to be tougher, suck it up, work hard, nobody cares, work harder. And that mindset is so outdated and so just genuinely bullshit. Just excuse my language. It is just not good. It's feeding into kids' insecurities and making them bottle things up that don't need to be bottled up. You should be able to show your emotion as a male, as an athlete, as a football player. Yeah, you're about to go tackle people, but that doesn't mean you can't have emotions, right? You show your excitement. Why can't you show your sadness and your despair, right? And your depression, your anxiety.
Okay.
And so I saw that a ton in college athletics and in my athletes. I work with at the facility I'm a head strength coach at now, and so that's something that I preach, is just being authentically you. And as soon as we show our vulnerabilities and drop the egos and drop those walls, that's when relationships are formed, because that's when you're like your movement, that's when you're choosing love, right? That's when you're showing your true self and what you can help people with. And having flaws, everybody has flaws, everybody has vulnerabilities, and but those things can be our greatest strengths with connecting with people.
Absolutely. Yeah. Pain is actually a stronger connector than anything else. When I will go to schools and I'll show this sped up video of a caterpillar that weaves a chrysalis around itself. And then you see this butterfly struggling out of this chrysalis. It's a huge struggle. The wings, that you can tell it's very uncomfortable. Eventually it comes out, and I will say, hey kids, who has ever felt like this butterfly really struggling? And everyone raises their hand. So everyone has their stuff. And then you realize, when you start being vulnerable, sharing your story, you realize that everyone has a story and that you're not alone. And that's just so important. And that's a huge part of getting from struggle to strength.
100%. Yeah, I think everybody's going through something that you don't see. And I think also another thing is that I want struggle strength to be is realize that we're not comparing whose trauma is worse or whose issues are harder or challenges are harder, right? I've come from Fairfield County, right? I'm a white privileged male. But that doesn't mean that I haven't gone through struggle, right? And I'm not saying my struggle is harder than somebody with a terminal illness, right? We all go through struggle, and we should all feel inspired to turn that into our strength, right? It's not about my struggle is worse than your struggle, right? Everybody's struggle is tough for them. It doesn't matter where it is and whose it is, and what the, socioeconomic factors of it are. It is struggle. The body receives pain the same way. It recognizes pain and suffering. It doesn't recognize where the pain and suffering is and who's it from, and it's pain and suffering no matter what.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it's not about as much what it is, but it's about how you choose to thoughtfully respond,
100%.
how you deal with it, and which path, as you keep talking about the paths, which path you choose to take. And you do have to have some awareness to be able to choose the loving path like 100%. You did, and courage, rather than going down the path of anger and resentment for what's going on in your life and blaming other people. I mean, there are two different distinct paths.
Very, very different. You can't change the cards you're dealt. It's how you play the hand, right? And I think that how you play that hand is really, that's what's going to dictate how your life develops and how your future develops. We're dealt circumstances in life that, as a believer myself, like as a Christian, sometimes some of the things I went through and some of the things I see other people have to go through, I'm like, why is this a thing? Like, how is that? We're dealt circumstances that I can't believe that are a thing. But that doesn't mean that you can't play that hand in a way that develops that that vulnerability into a strength, and develops the people around you and inspires the people around you.
Yeah, absolutely. Which you definitely have done. So how do you weave this messaging into, you're a personal strength coach. How do you weave the message into what you do every single day? Just for everybody that's listening, for people that need maybe a little bit more of an idea of what the path is and how they can start.
Yeah. I mean, I think I started, obviously still pretty young, but when I was an assistant strength coach, I think I started it by kind of inviting others to start the conversation around me, because when I worked at schools, they didn't necessarily want me to have my own brand, or, when I worked at one school, I went on a podcast and the AD showed up in my office the next day and was like, we don't want you talking about your mental health around athletes. And I resigned the next week. But so coming to this facility as the director of performance at Impact, it was nice because I was able to develop my own brand and my message and be able to be my authentic self. I think that's been super rewarding the past 2 years, is to be able to I can write something on a whiteboard, a quote on a whiteboard, and my athletes all read it and they know I'm here for them, and they know I invite that conversation. I don't just invite it, I encourage it. And so I think the more you can encourage the conversation, and they know what I go through. And I think, me sharing my message and my struggle has only helped them open up to me. And I think some coaches get a little bit scared because they're afraid they're going to have to be a clinician, but somebody opening up to you doesn't mean you have to solve their problems. It means you need to listen without even having your response in your head while they're talking. Listen to them, just listen, hear them. These kids need to be heard, and just people in general just need to be heard. You don't always need to solve their problems. Obviously, if there's an emergency, we're mandated reporters, so we're gonna refer them to the right resources and make sure they're safe. But they're not looking for a clinician; they're looking for another human being to connect with, and someone that's been in their shoes before and understands that struggle. So the more you can live that struggle and be honest about your struggle, the better off the people around you are going to be, because you're going to connect with them so much more.
That's so true. It's just literally not fearing what's in front of you, but seeing the light of humanity in the person that's in front of you, realizing they're just a person in pain and listening to them, being present. You're right. I mean, that's what we all want, to be safe, seen, and celebrated.
Right,
And
right.
so it's so vital. Just because somebody's hurting and is going through something doesn't mean that you have to have all the skills and tools in the moment. They just want to be heard. And
100%.
yeah, that
Yeah,
is
I think what I've been through and what I go through on a daily basis has definitely developed that courage to talk about it and courage to hear people and listen and be that listening ear. But I also think, my educational background, like my bachelor's was in psychology, and then my master's was in exercise science. So kind of a unique background in my education. And so it just was like the perfect blend of like mind, body, and soul, just like, and just understanding the human connection. The more we can connect and be honest with and truthful with each other, and that, we're going to save lives, first of all. I mean, that's just the bottom line. And then also, we're going to make lives way more loving and way more fruitful for people.
Mm-hmm. Well, during this podcast, you've hit on every single one of our character values in the formula for choosing love. You've talked about and actually exemplified courage and gratitude. I mean, it was just amazing to me how much gratitude is a part of your life as you go through, and you're grateful for not only your family, but all of the things that the struggle has taught you. You talked about forgiveness, forgiving that coach and setting yourself free so that you could be able to serve,
right,
and have the courage to step outside of even your current struggle to help others. And that's when we help and heal ourselves.
And I'm sure that was so tough for you. I mean, being able to serve like you are right now, after enduring something so traumatic, is so inspiring to me. Genuinely, it's like, I knew I couldn't serve until I forgave, because I was holding on to pain that wasn't helping, and that wasn't going to help me help others, and wasn't going to allow me to choose love.
That's beautiful. And you know what? I forgave, and my forgiveness enabled me to serve with a pure heart.
Right.
I actually, after the tragedy, I said that there were 28 victims, and that included Adam Lanza and his mom. And not that Adam wasn't, I mean, of course he's responsible for what he did. It was heinous. But he wasn't born that way. And so I had more curiosity. I was trying to figure out, he wasn't born that way, but he became a mass murderer. So what happened in between? What was the root cause? How can we address that so that we can help and heal other kids that are having that same root cause? And so I kind of shifted more to proactive prevention. But the fact that I forgave almost right away was something that strengthened me. It freed me from those feelings of anger and hatred, resentment, frustration. I really didn't have that. So I got onto to the mission of choosing love really quicker. And I'm grateful for that. And also, I have my faith to thank for that as well, because I was raised with a tremendous faith, and I'm also a Christian. And I really appreciated having that foundation.
Definitely. I mean, it taught me how to forgive at a young age. But I mean, the pain you dealt with is not a lot of people are going to forgive after something like that, especially someone so close to you. And, it's just so traumatic. And, I remember that day. I was a freshman in high school that day. And I remember sitting in my English class, and it was just terrifying just hearing about it. And I just, the fact that you forgave and have not only forgiven, but also blessed so many other people with your work is amazing.
Well, our stories are actually similar, even though obviously different circumstances, but a similar thoughtful response. And for me, I'm just grateful that I was able to respond this way, because it's the best way to live. It was the best way to model recovery for my JT, who was 12 years old at the time. I wanted him to be for something in his life and not have to fight against. And so that has helped him as well. And I hope I try to model for other people what it looks like, and that it's possible in 100%. Any situation to thoughtfully respond with love. And that's where our personal power is, when we're in love. I believe we're really only ever in love or fear, and you can't be in the same place at once. And so you have to make a choice. And so what Choose Love is trying to do is give kids and big kids the essential life skills and awareness in how to make that choice for love, because that's when you thrive. That's when you flourish in life. You can put your best foot forward and be the best version of yourself. And that's just what I want for everyone. And amazingly, I got to this point because of my struggle. I wouldn't be having this conversation. I wouldn't have met you, Tom. We wouldn't be having this conversation if I didn't go through what I went through and you went through what you went through. And I'm always so grateful every day for the connections that I make through
100%. No, it's such a good point. I mean, like, struggle really does provide you with a lot of connections and a lot of interactions that might probably never would have happened if you didn't go through something traumatic or go through some sort of adversity that you can't connect on.
Right. Absolutely. So the title of your movement, struggletostrength.com, so amazing. I encourage everyone that's listening to visit and support you and spread the word. And I'm just so thankful for the time that we spent today, Tom, on the Choose Love podcast.
Likewise.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. Thanks for everything that you do. It's really amazing.
Thank you. You as well.
Hey, hey, oh. It's all part of us. We can all choose love. It'll lift you up if you let